Rudolf Diesel, the inventor of the diesel engine, vanished under baffling circumstances in 1913. At the height of his career, Diesel boarded a steamship and was never seen alive again. His disappearance on the eve of World War I sparked immediate speculation and debate that continues over a century later. Born in 1858, Rudolf Diesel was a genius engineer, best known for developing the compression-ignition internal combustion engine that bears his name. He envisioned an engine that could deliver unprecedented efficiency compared to the steam engines of the day. Diesel filed his first patent for the engine in 1892, and within a few years he had built successful prototypes. Notably, his design could run on a variety of fuels. An early model even ran on peanut oil, demonstrating the engine's flexibility. This adaptability meant that engine power could reach parts of the world without ready access to coal or petroleum. By 1912, Diesel's invention was a worldwide success, with over 70,000 engines in use globally. Diesel himself became a wealthy and respected figure, celebrated for an innovation that was transforming industry and transportation. On the evening of September 29, 1913, Rudolf Diesel boarded the SS Dresden, a steamship in Antwerp, Belgium, bound for Harwich, England. He planned to attend the opening of a new diesel engine plant and to meet with British Royal Navy officials about installing diesel engines in submarines. Diesel dined on board and retired to his cabin around 10 p.m., asking to be awakened at 6:15 a.m. the next day. That morning, however, he didn't answer his wake-up call. Crew who checked his cabin found it completely empty. Tellingly, the bed had not been slept in, and a clean nightshirt was laid out, while his watch was left on the bedside, as if he had prepared for bed but never actually went to sleep. More ominous clues were found up on deck. Diesel's hat and neatly folded overcoat were discovered beneath the afterdeck railing, near the ship's stern. The ship was searched, but no trace of the missing inventor turned up during the voyage. It appeared that Diesel had gone overboard during the night. Roughly 10 days later, on October 10, 1913, crew on a Dutch vessel in the North Sea came upon a body floating in the water. The corpse was badly decomposed and unrecognizable, so the sailors retrieved personal items from the clothing and returned the body to the sea, as was the style at the time. These recovered belongings were later identified by Diesel's son as items his father carried, providing tragic confirmation that Rudolf Diesel had died at sea. In the days following Diesel's disappearance, puzzling clues emerged about his state of mind and finances. Shortly before his trip, Diesel had given his wife, Martha, a tightly sealed bag with instructions that it not be opened until a week later. After he vanished, Martha opened the parcel and found 20,000 German marks in cash, along with financial statements indicating that the family's bank accounts were nearly empty. Despite Diesel's fame and the commercial success of his engine, he had suffered serious personal financial troubles due to bad investments. It turned out that despite maintaining the image of a wealthy and successful industrialist, he was essentially bankrupt, at least on a personal level. Investigators also learned that in Diesel's diary, a small cross mark had been drawn next to the date September 29, 1913, as if ominously marking it as the day of his death. These revelations painted a picture of a man who might have been planning for the end, and they would heavily influence one of the leading theories about his fate. The world reacted with shock to the news of Diesel's disappearance. Officially, authorities eventually deemed his death a likely self-ending, given the evidence of financial ruin and his last recorded actions. However, the mysterious circumstances, a prominent inventor vanishing from a ship without witnesses, fueled rampant speculation in the press and public. Almost immediately, newspapers offered sensational explanations. But let's discuss what might be the most likely theory first, before we get into those. One straightforward theory is that Rudolf Diesel ended it all by leaping into the sea voluntarily. Proponents of this view point to his dire financial straits and personal issues as compelling motives. The documents found in his wife's keeping showed that Diesel had virtually no money left, which would have been a crushing revelation for a man of his stature. That said, while this is the way the case is reported, I have to question this somewhat. While Rudolf Diesel may have indeed been heavily in debt and virtually bankrupt, relatively speaking, he held extremely valuable patents. And this isn't just speculation. The most powerful navy in the world at the time had called him specifically to discuss implementing his patented technology into their submarines. What I'm saying is that the vast majority of people, even wealthy people, would feel blessed to be this quote-unquote broke. Further, the value of the patents themselves has to also be taken into account. He could have sold the rights to his revolutionary patents and become fabulously wealthy in an instant, given the revolutionary nature of his technology, which he fully owned. All that said, it's entirely possible that Diesel, despite being an engineering genius, wasn't a financial genius and didn't fully understand or realize this. After all, he did manage to lose the vast majority of his wealth due to poor investments in the first place. In addition, Diesel had been suffering from health problems and exhaustion in the years leading up to 1913. Faced with mounting debts and physical ailments, it's plausible he fell into despair. Supporters of the theory also cite the eerie preparation he seemed to make, such as setting out his nightshirt and marking his diary as if anticipating death. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one, and Diesel jumping overboard of his own accord is a straightforward narrative. Yet some aspects don't entirely make sense. For instance, why didn't he leave a note behind, or a more direct indication? From the moment Diesel disappeared, theories of foul play have captured the public imagination. One hypothesis centers on German agents or the government of Kaiser Wilhelm II. In 1913, Europe was on the brink of war, and Diesel's inventions had significant military value. Diesel had refused to grant Germany exclusive rights to his engine, and he was heading to England to discuss aiding the British Navy, a potential threat to German naval ambitions. The British Royal Navy was interested in using diesel engines to power its submarines, and Diesel's meeting in London about submarine engines was no secret. This fueled suspicions that German operatives might have removed him to stop Britain from gaining an even more significant naval edge than they already had. And after all, Germany's diesel-powered submarines would end up being essentially the only way Imperial Germany could give the Royal Navy and British commerce a black eye in the war. While this scenario offers a very clear motive, denying Britain a strategic technology, no hard evidence has ever emerged to prove Diesel was slain for military reasons. A more fringe theory suggests that a German nationalist may have taken the matter into his own hands when he saw Diesel on the ship. And yeah, for those of you listening very closely, that was an intentional pun. Under this theory, Rudolf Diesel's working with the British was seen as a betrayal by this unknown assailant, as Diesel was German. Another popular theory, also related to foul play, suggests a slaying by an industrial rival. Rudolf Diesel's engine was revolutionary not just for navies, but also for the energy industry. The diesel engine could run on oils derived from plants as well as petroleum, threatening to upend the fuel status quo. This led some to speculate that powerful oil interests wanted diesel out of the picture. In fact, as early as 1913, the press speculated about conspiracies involving big American oil firms. However, historians and energy experts generally find this theory unconvincing. Diesel engines at that time were mostly used in industrial and marine applications, and there was no infrastructure to mass-produce vegetable oil fuel in competition with petroleum. While processes did exist for creating biodiesel fuels, these wouldn't become economically viable for half a century after the supposed hit. What's also forgotten is that early 20th century oil barons were still profiting from selling diesel fuel, which is itself derived from petroleum. Diesel's invention was actually a significant benefit to the oil business, not a death knell. Other theories have been floated over the last century but haven't gained much traction. Crossing the North Sea in late September could be perilous, and it's conceivable that Diesel simply fell overboard. Perhaps he decided to take a stroll on the moonlit deck to clear his head and lost his footing, tumbling into the cold water below. Diesel was known to have health issues. It's possible he suffered a dizzy spell, heart attack, or stroke that caused him to fall from the ship by accident. Supporters of the accident theory point out that no evidence of foul play was found at the scene. His belongings were left undisturbed, and there were no signs of a fight. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a reminder to hit that subscribe button and share this video with 2 people you know. Also, I haven't mentioned it in a while, but if you want a shout out or to just help out even more, you can join up on the Patreon or YouTube membership for as little as $1 a month. The Kerguelen Plateau, located in the southern Indian Ocean, is a vast underwater volcanic plateau. Spanning approximately 500,000 square miles, it's one of the world's largest submerged land masses. Over the years, scientists have debated whether this plateau could be considered a lost continent. The Kerguelen Plateau was formed by volcanic activity associated with the Kerguelen hotspot, beginning around 130 million years ago during the early Cretaceous period. This hotspot led to extensive basaltic lava flows, creating a large igneous area that includes the Kerguelen Plateau and the Broken Ridge. Initially, parts of the plateau were above sea level, forming a substantial landmass. Geological evidence suggests that the plateau experienced multiple phases of volcanic activity, contributing to its complex structure. Over time, the Kerguelen Plateau underwent significant subsidence, leading to its current submerged state. Today, most of the plateau lies beneath 3,000 to 6,000 feet of water, with only a few islands, such as the Kerguelen Islands and Heard Island, remaining above sea level. The submersion is attributed to a combination of factors, including the cooling of the lithosphere, as well as possible tectonic movements. Several lines of evidence have led scientists to consider the Kerguelen Plateau as a potential lost continent. Studies have identified rocks on the plateau that are typically associated with continental crust, such as granites. These findings suggest that parts of the plateau may have originated from continental material. Further, fossil discoveries, including those of ancient coniferous trees, indicate that the plateau once supported terrestrial ecosystems. This supports the idea that substantial portions of the plateau were above sea level and possibly connected to other land masses, facilitating the migration of species. Further yet, the composition of sedimentary rocks found on the plateau shows similarities to those in regions like India and Australia. This suggests that the plateau was once part of the supercontinent Gondwana. As Gondwana fragmented, the plateau became isolated and eventually submerged, which would make it at the very least a microcontinent. Despite the supporting evidence, there are arguments against classifying the Kerguelen Plateau as a lost continent. While there are indications of continental material, much of the plateau is composed of basaltic rock typical of oceanic crust. This suggests that the plateau may not meet the criteria of a true continent, which is primarily composed of continental crust. Also, the definition of a continent typically includes considerations of size, elevation, and the presence of a distinct continental shelf. While the Kerguelen Plateau is extensive, its predominantly submerged state and geological composition may exclude it from being classified as a true continent. There's a popular claim circulating on the internet that human kidneys have moved, to a different location in the body. People who believe this assert that kidneys used to be located in the lower back, near the waist, but now appear higher up under the rib cage. This idea often crops up as a so-called Mandela effect example, a collective false memory of something that never actually changed. In reality, the position of the kidneys in human anatomy has not changed at all. The confusion arises from misremembering and misinformation, not any real physical relocation of our organs. The anatomical reality is that human kidneys have a fixed, well-documented position in the body. They reside high in the abdominal cavity toward the back. Specifically, each kidney sits on either side of the spine, approximately between the levels of the 12th thoracic and 3rd lumbar vertebrae in the backbone. In simple terms, your kidneys are roughly midway up your back, just below your rib cage. The left kidney is normally slightly higher than the right one, because the liver occupies space on the right side above the kidney. Each kidney lies deep against the rear abdominal wall, nestled in a cushion of fat, which honestly sounds super comfy. But all this leads to the obvious question. If the kidneys have always been high in the back, why do so many people recall them being down closer to the waist? Several factors likely contribute to this widespread misbelief. One major reason is the way we talk about and feel pain in that area. People often associate any lower back ache with kidney pain, and it's common to hear someone say, "My kidneys hurt," when experiencing pain near the belt line. In reality, true kidney pain, for example, from a kidney infection or kidney stones, usually presents in the flank, which is the area on the sides of your mid-back just under the ribs. Often, when someone has pain in the lower back, it's muscular or spinal, not coming from the kidneys at all. However, because we casually refer to the general area in relation to kidney pain, it can create a mental image that the kidneys must be located there. This is essentially an illusion of the language we use. Media and pop culture have also reinforced the idea of kidneys being way lower down than they actually are. In boxing or action movies, a punch to the lower back or abdominal area is generally referred to as a kidney punch. This term exists because a blow to that region can indeed jostle the kidneys, which are just above the hips, toward the back. Therefore, hearing a fighter was just hit with a kidney punch may lead you to believe that the kidneys have sustained a direct hit with the so-called kidney punch. And here's where I have a confession. Before I did research into this topic, I thought that's where the kidneys were as well. I'm gonna blame years of watching boxing and mixed martial arts for that, rather than the Mandela effect. Another source of confusion comes from medical procedures and discussions that are easily misunderstood. A notable example is kidney transplantation. In a kidney transplant surgery, surgeons don't put the new kidney in the exact spot where the original kidneys are. Instead, the donated kidney is placed in the lower abdomen, since it's easier to connect it to blood vessels and the bladder in that location. Importantly, the patient's own kidneys are usually not removed during a transplant unless medically necessary, meaning the original kidneys often stay in their normal position. Again, confession time, this isn't something I knew before researching this topic, and I now feel surprisingly knowledgeable about these important organs. So yeah, I'm just gonna come out and say it here. Take care of your kidneys, folks. The kidney Mandela effect is one of the most fascinating Mandela effects I've come across because it's actually kind of plausible at first glance. There's so much evidence to suggest that kidneys really aren't where you remembered them, from the transplants to the kidney punches. And yeah, as a quick aside, if you get a kidney transplant and you take a kidney punch, you're literally taking a punch to your transplanted kidney. For as long as humanity has pondered the cosmos, we have asked not only how the universe began, but also how it might end. Modern cosmology has transformed this ancient curiosity into a scientific inquiry. Ever since Edwin Hubble's 1929 discovery that galaxies are rushing apart, scientists have debated what the ultimate fate of that expansion is. One long-standing hypothesis for the end of the universe is the Big Crunch, essentially the reverse of the Big Bang. In this scenario, gravity's pull eventually overcomes the outward momentum of expansion, causing the cosmos to stop expanding and begin collapsing inward. If the universe's average density is above a certain critical density, gravity will gradually halt the expansion, much like Earth's gravity can slow a thrown ball to a stop and pull it back down. The expansion would then reverse, with galaxies accelerating back toward one another. Over an immense timescale, all matter might coalesce, and the universe would shrivel to an extremely hot, dense state, essentially the Big Bang in reverse. Importantly, current evidence suggests that a big crunch is unlikely given our universe's parameters. Decades ago, it was reasonable to think gravity might eventually win and trigger a collapse, but the discovery of cosmic acceleration in 1998 upended that expectation. The universe appears to be flat or open, not closed, and dominated by dark energy, so there may simply not be enough matter or pull to ever reverse the expansion. While the Big Crunch cannot be entirely ruled out, all measurements to date point away from this fate. Another radical end-of-universe scenario is the Big Rip, in which the expansion of the universe accelerates so ferociously that it literally rips apart all structures. This idea arises from a particular type of dark energy, or something even stranger. In our current universe, dark energy is thought to be causing accelerated expansion, but at a relatively steady rate. In a Big Rip scenario, galaxies, stars, planets, and eventually atoms themselves would be torn apart as space-time expands at an ever-increasing pace. Essentially, even the gravitational and molecular bonds holding objects together would be overcome by the accelerating stretch of space. One by one, first galaxy clusters, then galaxies, then solar systems would be pulled apart. Finally, in the last moments before the end, atoms and subatomic particles would be shredded when the expansion becomes infinitely rapid. At that instant, the universe would become a featureless, infinitely expanding void, effectively a singularity of expansion. This violent end is, fortunately, not the most likely scenario according to most experts. The Big Rip requires a form of energy that violates certain energy conditions in physics, and it doesn't fit well with current observations. Among all the scenarios, the heat death of the universe, also known as the Big Freeze or Big Chill, is currently considered the most likely fate by many cosmologists. Unlike the sudden drama of a Big Rip or Big Crunch, heat death is a far more gradual process without any observable conclusion. In this scenario, the universe continues to expand forever, and in doing so, it ages into a state of utter exhaustion. Over extremely long timescales, all sources of usable energy are depleted. Stars burn through their fuel and wink out. Galaxies slow their star formation until no new stars are born. Even black holes, the last bastions of mass, evaporate via Hawking radiation. The cosmos heads toward a state of maximum entropy from which it can never recover. In thermodynamics, the second law states that the total entropy of a closed system never decreases, and the universe as a whole meets the definition of a closed system. Heat death gets its name because ultimately all heat dissipates. Everything becomes spread thinly and evenly across space, reaching an extremely low, nearly unchanging temperature. In this frigid cosmos, no complex structures can survive, as no free energy is available to sustain processes like life or motion. It is, in effect, the end of everything that has ever existed. Time itself becomes meaningless on a grand scale, because nothing changes or can happen when the cosmos is in thermodynamic equilibrium. Physicists sometimes say that in a heat death, the arrow of time, defined by growing entropy, would stand still once entropy can increase no further. Current observations favor this big freeze outcome because our universe's expansion appears destined to continue indefinitely. Contemplating the end of the universe inevitably raises profound existential and philosophical questions. Each of these cosmic finale scenarios carries implications for how we find meaning in a cosmos which inevitably ends. The notion of heat death, for instance, has been called perhaps the most depressing scientific idea ever formulated. It foresees a future in which life anywhere in the universe is ultimately doomed to extinction as usable energy runs out. All achievements, creations, and even knowledge itself would eventually be annihilated, reduced to an inanimate, undifferentiated cold mist. This can lead to a sense of cosmic futility and the feeling that if nothing endures, does anything we do now ultimately matter? Philosophers have grappled with this question, often arriving at different emotional responses. Some respond with despair or existential dread, while others find it a call to focus on the present and on creating meaning now, rather than in some far-off forever. Interestingly, not everyone is frightened or saddened by the universe's eventual demise. Some philosophers and cosmologists take a rather stoic or even humorous view of it. After all, if nothing in life really matters, then you get to create your own meaning and define your own destiny. You get to define what success means to you. And whether that's producing YouTube videos every day of your life or being the best at Hello Kitty Island Adventure, the goals are defined by you. Or to put it in more visual terms, just take a look at the image on your screen right now and let that sink in. Mystery meat is a term used to describe meat products of ambiguous composition, appearance, or origin, often served in institutional settings such as school cafeterias, hospitals, or prisons. The term typically invokes the idea that the diner cannot readily identify the type of meat they are eating, whether it's beef, pork, chicken, or a blend of several animal sources. Historically, mystery meat gained prominence in mid-20th century American popular culture. It appeared in jokes about cafeteria meals, military ration kits, and cheap diners serving patrons questionable meals. The foods that fit into this category are often highly processed, heavily seasoned, and presented in forms like patties, nuggets, or loaves that obscure their actual ingredients. For example, certain forms of processed lunch meat, canned meat products, and low-quality sausages have sometimes been labeled mystery meat. The concept has spawned a variety of urban legends about what exactly might be lurking in these unidentifiable slabs of quote-unquote protein. These tales, often exchanged in whispered tones among students in lunch lines or passed along through social media, evoke a shared anxiety about a lack of transparency in our food system. One of the most persistent urban legends is the idea that school cafeterias or fast food chains rely on substandard ingredients, such as ground-up rats, pigeons, or other vermin. This story often circulates without solid evidence, fueled primarily by the anxiety that large institutions are willing to cut corners to save money. However, government inspectors regularly monitor meat plants and food service providers to ensure compliance with sanitation and safety standards. This, of course, makes the intentional inclusion of such repulsive ingredients both illegal and highly unlikely. While isolated cases of contamination can occur, the likelihood that any major institution would knowingly serve rodent meat as a substitute for beef or chicken is virtually non-existent. Also, I haven't done the math on this, but I'm reasonably certain factory farming has made rodent meat more expensive than chicken. Another class of legends involves the notion that school lunch meats, particularly in underfunded school districts, contain large percentages of non-meat fillers. These ingredients, such as soy, cereal grains, or other plant byproducts make the meat look very off, giving rise to the suspicion that what appears to be meat might be something else entirely.